Hey, and welcome to another edition of Try Knoxville. Mike Roberts along for the ride one more time. And Cal Wyman, I'll tell you what, fire chief here for Knoxville Fire and Rescue. I always have to remember there's two different Knoxville fire departments. So Knoxville Fire and Rescue, City of Knoxville. And Cal, the reason I wanted you to come in here is kind of get people to know you a little bit more. You've been around for, what, 2-3 years now? 2 years?
About 2 years now.
Yeah, 2 years now. And they're starting to get to know you. But I want to get to know the real you, if you will. And I always call it the way back machine. So let's start off with, where were you born and raised at?
I was actually born and raised in a small town. I call it East Central Iowa. It's between Cedar Rapids and Anamosa, Springville. Okay. Town's like 1,200 people. My graduating class was like 36. So very small community that I grew up in. I was on the volunteer fire department there. My parents still live there today. We go back and see them occasionally, but yeah, very small town.
I know exactly where you're talking about because I go up to Monticello to a hot rod show up there all the time.
Yeah, you drive right by it.
Yeah.
But if you say Springville, nobody knows what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So, but given between Anamosa and Cedar Rapids, everybody's like, oh yeah, that's that little town.
Yeah,
that's
right,
it.
Right there it is. Yeah, just outside of Cedar Rapids has that great big gigantic greenhouse. I remember seeing it on the way by too. So.
Yep.
And then Anamosa's got the Motorcycle Hall of Fame. Did that used to be an old Walmart building maybe or something?
Yeah.
It has a layout to it. Yeah, we went inside that. I encourage anybody that's doing the vacation thing to check that out. They actually have a wooden track in there, a portion of it. So
as you're going to Monticello, you go up the hill there, and JP Cycles is right there too. So yeah,
neat part of the country to grow up in as a kid because my motorcycles dominated up there and still do. I mean, in the summertime especially. But there was hill climbing going on all the time back then. Everything else. Did you get involved in any of that stuff growing up?
I didn't. I was mainly when my mom got remarried, my stepdad is a big tractor puller. So we were tractor pullers. I mean, we traveled the NTPA circuits, the outlaw circuits. We did all that, and that's kind of where my summers and stuff were.
Yeah, kind of like with me and the racetrack stuff. But and again, tractor pulling, it doesn't shock me because the more you get in the Minnesota, Wisconsin, Northern Illinois type atmosphere, that it changes direction a little bit for you there.
Yep.
So pretty neat stuff. How many years did you travel around with that thing? Because growing around any type of motorsport, that's kind of neat as a kid.
Yeah. We were, as long as I can kind of remember, at least 8-10 years before I moved out, probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
So basically up through your high school career then of getting out of high school then.
Yeah.
When did you graduate?
2000.
2000. Wow. You're getting old, but
I am.
No,
I hear it every day. I feel it too.
Yeah, I'd been out of school 16 years by the time you graduated, so we'll talk about being old sometime. But what got you involved in fire service? You talked about volunteer fire department up there, but what got you involved?
It was my family. My grandpa was the fire chief in the small town that we grew up in. He later became the fire chief for Rockwell Collins for all of Iowa. My dad just retired as a training chief for Marion. My uncle was in it. My brother's in it. I think when my dad retired, we did a little math, and all together in our family, we had like 164 years between all of us in the fire service.
Wow. That's amazing. That's amazing. When you got out of high school, what'd you do, college?
I did. I went to Kirkwood and got my associate's degree in fire science, and then University of Iowa, got my paramedic and started working.
It always amazes me when you start talking about paramedics because when you went through it, it changed quite a bit since the previous 10 years, and now to go through it, it's almost like becoming a doctor anymore, it seems like.
Yeah, it was funny because when I was working in Mason City, we didn't have to be National Register. We just had to have our state license. Mm-hmm. Well, then a couple of years before I left up there, they made everybody go back and get their National Registry again. And you sit down and take that test again after you've been out 18, 20 years, and you're looking at questions going, man, I bet we talked about this 20 years ago, but I sure don't remember it, And, it was different test, different, whole different set of dynamics when you went back to get it again.
It's always funny. I compare any kind of certification you do, whether it be paramedic or a welder or whatever. You always learn things. It's like algebra. Yeah. How many times have we actually used algebra or trigonometry? I mean, it all depends on your profession, of course, but I mean, I don't use it. Maybe a certain form of it, but then to sit down and have to take a test, in my case, 36 years later,
it's
there's
a
no
big
way.
change.
Yeah, there's no way. But you got into the fire science thing a little bit. You started doing the fire direction. You mentioned you ended up in Mason City. And Mason City, I know from firsthand, having friends up there. In fact, one of my classmates still lives up in there. Although it's small town Iowa, it's got a pretty impressive hospital facility, and overall, just everything's big up there.
Yeah, it's it's the biggest town for. We called it the biggest town for 2 miles or
Right.
2 hours because, it's in that part of the country. It was the Des Moines of down here. I mean,
Right.
you had everything in that town, and that's where everybody came. So yeah, it's not huge by any means, 30,000,
Right.
but good sized town.
I didn't know this until recently, and I remember seeing this show, Music Man, was based out of Mason City, Iowa.
Yeah, Meredith Wilson.
Yeah, I did not know that until I probably watched it half a dozen times as a kid, but literally watched it like a month ago. And so I thought, there's an Iowa story here. I know this besides just the song and everything Iowa, but so I Googled it, and boom, there it was.
Yeah, they had a kind of a reconstruction of that downtown area in one of the old buildings downtown that you could walk through and looked. The Music Man Square.
Really?
Yeah.
Still in existence then up there?
Yep.
Oh, I see a road trip coming up.
Yep.
I like new things like that. How long were you in Mason City?
Where was I up there? 15 years.
Okay. That's cold up there, man.
It does get cold up there.
That's the only thing I remember really, and windy. Of course, everywhere's windy now, but
It's always windy up there. It's
Yeah.
flat, no trees.
I was coming back from Minneapolis one time. I think it was the second bridge, I call it. Second exit, whatever you want to call it. And big storms in the summertime. And a dually in front of me literally spun around facing me. I don't know if he kind of wind and hydroplaned at the same time. And like, wow, that's a big deal. And that's why I realized it's always windy.
It's always windy up there, yep.
What is there to do in Mason City of 30,000 people when you're a young fella growing up in the fire department?
Oh, there was, kind of the same thing as you do everywhere,
You wasn't doing the Music Man. We talked about this
Yep,
before we went on.
no,
You weren't singing.
You
Yeah.
don't want me to sing. That's not good. Mason City has a dirt track up there as well. So, we did some of the racing. We'd just hang out and,
Was that your first paramedic gig? Mason
No, I actually worked as a paramedic at the volunteer fire department I was in Springville.
City? Okay.
And then I worked part-time between area ambulance in Cedar Rapids and Jones County Ambulance in Anamosa.
While we're talking about paramedics, and let's bring this up, and I don't want to take this for granted at all, everybody, and I blame this clear back to the TV series Emergency, everybody thinks that when an ambulance rolls up, it's automatically got a paramedic in it. Now, more times than not nowadays it does, but that's not necessarily the difference. As limited as we can, the difference between the types of service you might get when an ambulance rolls up without getting too heavy into details.
Like I say, like I try to explain to some people sometimes, if you have a paramedic on the ambulance, you have pretty much a mobile emergency room there. They can do a lot of things that the doctors do in the emergency room right there with you.
Mm-hmm.
Where if you have like a basic or an advanced EMT, they can't do as much, but they can get you stabilized to get you to the emergency room. So I would say that's maybe the easiest way to explain it.
Sure, exactly right. As far as why I bring that up is you mentioned Springville, small community. For a paramedic service to exist, that's not just easy peasy, if you will. It's tough to have paramedics available all the time, especially on a volunteer basis.
Yeah. In Springville's a non-transport service.
Right.
So we had our ambulances came out of 4 different communities. Either came out of Cedar Rapids, Anamosa, Central City, or Lisbon, Mount Vernon area. You were stuck with the patient for 15, 20 minutes till an ambulance got there.
Yeah, that's pretty heavy stuff on the shoulders, really.
Yeah.
I mean,
and my first call as a paramedic was actually a CPR in progress, and it was a longtime family friend. So talk about just diving in and getting wet all at once and not really just testing the waters. It was interesting, but if you sign up to do this in a small community, that's always there.
you're going to know somebody.
Yep.
You're going to know somebody. You end up in Mason City, and then somehow or another, I always say you moved down here because it's warmer.
Oh, that was kind of the plan.
Although it's not much warmer.
No.
Every winter I blame you for how cold it is because you brought the cold with you. But how'd you tell me how you ended up in Knoxville.
Actually, it was kind of just by luck and by chance. Mason City was getting ready for their deputy chief promotion as well. I saw Knoxville had one coming up, so I kind of took it trying to prepare for Mason Cities. I went through the assessment center, went through all the interviews and testing and all that, and lo and behold, it got offered to me. And
careful what you wish for, huh?
Yeah. And talking with my now wife, she wasn't at the time where we both were from the small community.
Sure.
She had 3 kids, I had 4 kids. We kind of wanted to raise them more in the smaller community. We just like the feel of it better. The feels more like home to us. So
Right.
we decided to pack everything up and move to Knoxville.
When you first came down to Knoxville to check things out, had you ever been to Knoxville before?
I'd been through it
Right.
number of times, but I never really. I stopped and got gas here a couple
Right.
times, but never really been to town until
What was your first impression?
I like the southern. I call it Southern Iowa, but
We all got a y'all down here. Yeah.
the small towns down in the southern couple tiers of counties, I like the feel of them because they all have the downtown square. They all have just that feel of a small town community, where everybody gets together, has a place to get together. So I just like that. And it's neat, Cedar Rapids, we didn't have that. Marion, we didn't have that. Springville didn't even have that.
Right.
For small town stuff. So, you come down, you got the squares. Everybody has those big, elaborate squares, and they decorate them for all the holidays. They do everything there. It's something that's special.
Yeah. I call it home. Of course, I've been here all my life, but it does. It gives you that warm feeling, if you will.
Yeah.
Chances are when you're walking down the street, you're going to know somebody you've walked across before, or if you don't, you still say good morning, or you say hi, how you doing, or whatever. It's a neat thing. And you mentioned, the farther south you go, it is that way. I remember my uncle moved down to Arispe, which is down by Creston, so even further south and west. And we went down to see him. I might have been 8, 9 years old. And around here, if you seen a pickup, you knew. You waved at the pickup, you knew. Down there, everybody just waves.
Yeah.
Just waves all the time. And I said, you've been here like 2 or 3 months, everybody goes, no, they all just wave at you all the
Just
time.
wave, yeah.
Yeah, it's very friendly in this part of the country, and not that it isn't North Central. If anybody from Mason City, especially old classmates, are living up there, but it's a different atmosphere down here.
Yeah, definitely.
Again, you came down and applied for the deputy chief job. You got the offer, and before you even started,
Yeah.
again, be careful what you wish for.
Yeah.
You got the big dog job.
Yeah. I got offered the deputy chief job. I accepted it, and a couple days later, Aaron Adams calls, and Chief Mitchell called me first and kind of gave me the heads up, and then Aaron Adams called and informed me that Chief Mitchell had resigned, and that I was going to start as interim chief until they could figure out what was all going to go on and go through their hiring process for that.
Did you say, hang on a second, I'll get back to you on this?
Yeah, it's like, well, I've already turned in my notice up here, so okay, yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of committed now.
Yep.
Was she fiance then? I know she's wife now. Was she fiance by then?
Yeah, I think, yeah, she was then.
What'd she think about that whole phone conversation?
I don't think she realized all that was involved with that.
Yeah.
Because I think she thought, 40-hour week job, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that way.
Let's compare them while you're talking about that. You were up in Mason City, 30,000 people. Chief up there, was it a what I call driving the desk job? Or
For the most part, yeah. It's, you saw him Monday through Friday.
Mm-hmm.
That was it. He had a big fire in the middle of the night. He might show up to it, walk around, talk to you,
Right.
and then go back home and go back to bed. But not how it is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not. And
smaller community, you're 7 days a week. I mean, if you're in town, you're going.
yep. Well, and even for me, even if I was a chief in a bigger town, I would still be there. I mean, that's just how I am.
The hunger to help is what I call it.
Yeah, I would still be there just to support and offer assistance where needed, and I just feel as a chief that's my job.
We should bring up also Chief Mitchell transferred up to Polk City,
Yep.
and again, wish the best of luck to him. I know he listens on a couple of times, and we're on Facebook together. So you're filling in for a time being when you come in. How long before the offer was to say, guess what, you are the guy?
I started here September 8th. Started the hiring process for chief a couple weeks after that, and middle to end of October.
Okay. So about 30 days-ish.
Yeah.
So when you took on the chief's responsibilities, if you will, again, it's a whole different ball game because we're not just, the city of Knoxville is not just a fire department, it's fire and ambulance service as well, which you've done both. You understood the whole logistics of that. The problem with small town community, and I've watched you guys reach out and reach out and reach out, is getting enough people to fill those shifts. Yep. And that's almost 24/7 of trying to do that. And since then, you guys have grown by numbers as far as number of calls, and now the service is going to be more as well coming up.
Yeah. One of the first things I started looking at when I got here is, the run volume, number of calls, the time a call normally takes, so if you're going to the local hospital, if you have to go to Des Moines, we started trying to figure out where we needed to be, and what we needed to do to get there. So we've kind of, we had plan A, plan B, C, D, E, I might have even been to F.
Right.
And then, we kind of talked about those different ways we could do things, and make sure we're covering all the calls that need to be covered. We have the crews and the staffing here that, when they're needed, because like you said, trying to get volunteers, even in a small town community, especially in the fire department, is hard just because of all the requirements that is mandated of us, that it's not volunteering. You're giving up hours and hours and hours of your time to do this. So it takes the right person, it takes a special person, and it takes a special family with them to understand the time commitment that's involved.
We should put out there also, when I say you're low on manpower, you need more help, whatever, it's not just the city of Knoxville. This is United States wide, maybe worldwide, because of the regulations, because of the amount of training hours you have to take now. Yep. And I mean, your Knoxville townships, your Clay townships, your hours, and oh great, we just had a big fire finally.
Yep, exactly.
It's day in and day out stuff.
It's a nationwide deal. I mean, you talk to a chief in any state in the United States, and they'll tell you the same thing. If they're a smaller department, that recruiting and retention is hard just because it's not like it used to be. There's a ton of rules and requirements now.
You've been here for a couple of years. Equipment changes happened quite a bit since you started also. There's a new engine coming. You've already got another one replaced. You've got Knoxville's first ladder truck. A lot of training involved in that. It's not just a pull it in the garage and shine it up thing.
Yeah. We started looking at some of the ISO reports that had been done and completed for Knoxville. And one of the things all of them have said for the last 3 or 4 reports was Knoxville needed a ladder truck, and a 2-engine response. Well, we didn't have the equipment to do that at the time, and we didn't have the pump capacity to meet fire flows that were required for the city of Knoxville. We looked at ways we could do that. Well, we obviously know as a community that we can't go out and buy a new ladder truck that's $1 million. Right. It's just not out there. So we worked with some people, and we found that Clinton Fire was getting ready to sell one of their old ladder trucks. Buying from a reputable department in the state, we felt very confident buying a used apparatus from them. We felt like we knew what we were getting. We knew if we had any issues, they'd be there to back us up and to help us and support it, whatever we needed through it. So we put a plan together, showed how we could do it and not really impact the budget at all. And council approved it. We went and got it back here and started training on it right away.
I want to specify a couple of things because I know how some people, there's always that same 5 or 10 people in the community that always want to complain about something. But let's specify, and I'll use the scoop the loop night for starters. And you guys set up out here, you put the flag out, you had the ladder up. First of all, thank you for that. That's an honorable thing you guys do when you do that. But I also want to put in there that it's also a training exercise. You guys sneak that kind of stuff in every now and then.
Right, because even though we're setting that flag up for a display or whatever,
Right.
somebody's still got to set that truck up. So to do that, they have to go through the repetitive motion of how to set it up, and it's all muscle memory, so that when they have to do it in a life or death situation, it's muscle memory. They know exactly what to do, how to do it without even thinking about it.
And you're doing something good for the community. You're logging in those training hours that are required now.
Yep.
You know, and again, the more toys you have, or the better toys you have, the more training you have to have on them.
Yep.
You know, so it works out good for both ways as far as protecting the community, I think, anyway, and the fact that you actually get some training done as well. And you've got some pretty a tight-knit group up there right now. But again, you're needing to add on to it. How do you sell not only Knoxville Fire and Rescue, but how do you sell small town Iowa to somebody that's not used to a small town or not used to Knoxville?
First things, when I talk to them about it's Knoxville, Iowa, it's like you've got all the features of small town Iowa. You've got the neighbors help, that come out and help. You got everybody's nice. You got everybody willing to pitch in and throw in when they need to. I said Knoxville's big enough that it has most of the amenities that you need, that you don't have to travel far to get.
Right.
Plus, especially for some of our younger members, Knoxville's fire department's busy enough that you get a lot of good education and experience, so that, if Knoxville and small town living isn't for you after a couple of years and you want to move on to a bigger department, you've got a good base and a good education that opens up all those doors for you to do that. But so far, most everybody that's been here that we've hired as a full-time, or even most of our part-time, stay and live in the area because of the community. Yeah,
and definitely a place to try out for sure. You mentioned the younger generation, if you will, and you're starting to get that old dog thing going again a little bit. But
I feel it every morning. Don't remind me.
At what point, when you're, again, back to selling Knoxville a little bit, you mentioned number of calls. Do they realize the call volume that this little town of 71, 72, 7,300 has? Because when I hear these numbers today, even, I'm completely astounded. How many calls did you guys have last year?
Last year we were about 2,150.
2,150 calls.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's more than one a day.
Yep.
That's more than two a day. I mean, that's just crazy.
Yeah. It's hard to compare fire departments around because everybody's set up differently. Sure. Everybody operates, but I look at it a lot of times. What I'll do is I'll take the total number of calls and then divide it by the total number on their department, so you see how many calls each person runs.
Right.
Last year when we did that a couple of years ago, when we were looking at our staffing, that number was astonishing. It was huge. We had people that were running. I think the one number that stuck out in my head is like 76 calls or 78 calls or something like that is what the average person on our department was running. So when you compare that to other towns, we were competing with the bigger cities because of our total number of calls and our number of people. So right. That was one of the big numbers that kind of helped move us into more of a to help increase our staffing levels to make us better and more prepared for what the community's needs were at the time.
Mm-hmm. Never has amazed me, and I'll be the one to say this out loud. No matter what size of community you're in, nobody appreciates that 911 response until they need it. They complain about taxpayers' money on the apparatuses. They complain about the training. They complain about the labor costs. But when you dial them three numbers, you expect that truck to show up.
You expect to show up, and you expect a well-trained crew that's going to handle your emergency without any hiccups, without any flaws. And, I hope that's what we're doing here is that's the kind of service that we want to be. That's
the kind of service that helps a community like ours, too, and trying out in Knoxville. I mean, I talked to this before. They look at education, our school facilities. They look at our hospitals. They look at our public safety. And those three we've got. We've got a good thing going on here. Plus, again, we're home.
Yep.
I know you're busy. I've lost a bet now because I could have swore that radio would have went off while you were here.
I would have bet so, too. But we've made it
it's
so
amazing.
Far.
All right, sir. Well, again, thank you for everything you do for the community. I know you are busting 7 days a week, 24/7, and I see you all the time because I bother you quite a bit too. But, it all boils down to this. You've got some big steps coming your way with some of the projects that the city and county is coming up with. The new pumper is coming in. When's the new engine coming in?
Should be any time.
Okay.
We were told it would be here end of April, but then obviously COVID set it back about 6 to 8 weeks. So
Right.
we're expecting it here anytime.
Awesome. You be safe, sir. Appreciate you coming in.
Yes, thank you.
That's another edition of Try Knoxville. And again, simple put, we're trying to promote why you should not just try Knoxville for racing or just to visit. Think about moving here. We'll see you next time.